This is Ryan from the Gecko Talk podcast. The Gecko Talk podcast is supported by Golden Valley Reptiles, a hobbyist breeder of leopard geckos with over 7 years of experience, with main focus of proving healthy, quality leopard geckos. Hello everyone, my name is Ryan and this is the Gecko Talk podcast. Today we have a very special guest, David from Bubbasgeckos. How are you, David?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm very excited for tonight. We kind of hyped it up for the people a little bit. Shout out to the Gecko Peasants, a little group chat. I'm really stoked. These questions that you have lined up are jam-packed, full of a lot of information that's going to be useful for marketing in this next season. So it's going to be freaking loony.
You're right. So tonight we're going to be talking about just genetics as a whole. So why don't we get it started? Why are genetics so important?
Dude, because everything has hex. Genetic info and tracking of lineage is very important. There's 3 strains of albino, and those shouldn't be crossed. These genes can lead. They're genes that are, I guess, capable of leading to infertility, slight deformities, for example, NDBE, etc. So that's basically a gist of why genetics can be very important, because you don't want to risk things you don't know about, especially with all those hidden pets. If you're just jumping in and getting a pet quality gecko, don't know too much about genetics, and you pair something that could be potentially risking the longevity of that animal, you don't really want to be doing that.
Yeah, for sure. It's also just good to, if you're looking at it as, a breeding standpoint, you should probably have all your collections as far as, genetic lineage all set up so you know what is what. Not buying from people that are saying that has something in it, and then once you actually test it and, nothing proves out, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and you can totally do that yourself, starting off with pet quality geckos and breeding, trying to figure stuff out. Mm-hmm. But that's gonna set you back years and years of work to actually do it correctly. So investing in quality animals, if you want to do this, if you want to breed, you want to make some babies, maybe just tiptoe the water, it's still a good idea to invest in reputable people with solid lineage, and at least have a little bit prior knowledge to as what genetics are lineage-wise. That's very important to keep track of.
Yeah, for sure. Also just knowing genetics as far as the basics go down, what's dominant, recessives, all of that is really important to know. Phenotypes, I think that was as far as most people coming in that are new, phenotypes are kind of a struggle. So getting that down really helps.
Yeah, and then there's also different wordage for the same exact thing in the hobby, which can be a little bit confusing. So definitely using sites like John's on geckoboa.com, where he lists everything out, gives you basically a description for each and everything. That's going to be really useful. And I'm not saying just drink the Kool-Aid and jump on one bandwagon, but you can also reference other reputable breeders. There's a plethora of people on Facebook, Instagram, even freaking TikTok now. So the knowledge is out there. You just have to be adamant in searching and knowing kind of what leads to taking a breeder's kind of advice instead of somebody who maybe studied school, went to a veterinarian school, got their degree, and hasn't really worked with them, but they have that book knowledge. It's going to be very different. You're going to get very skewed answers. So reaching out to a breeder could probably be your best bet for finding some solid information.
Yeah. Genetics are also just generally important for whatever you're crossing to. Like, if you're outcrossing, genetics are very important in that sake.
Yeah, and introducing like wild bloodlines like that is totally going to rejuvenate a population if you're going to be bringing in wild animals to begin with, working these things out, basically line breeding and bringing them back to each other to find out different traits. It's kind of really important to be outcrossing correctly. So just like your normal macularis, you want to get like a wild type, and that totally changes your game. Freshens your bloodlines and gets you back on track for producing animals without deformities or effects of being too inbred, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How does genetic lineage help?
Lineage is going to be a beast. There's definitely a sort of cult in keeping very well documented tracking of lineage, and rightfully so. Keeping track of percentages is going to be key. We've talked about this a lot. I'm going to keep pushing this. It's going to be very important when we come to hatching season and marketing animals in a correct way to further the hobby. And what do I mean by that? Like percentages. When you pair a pure clown, for example, I'm always going to reference these clowns because it's something I'm really excited about. When you pair a pure clown, for example, to a normal, you're going to get 50% clown G, tangerine, and the offspring. If you cross that with another tangerine line, it's a tangerine cross, and it would be labeled 50% clown, and this is going with that the other tangerine line was pure as well. It'd be 50% of that other tangerine line. And this will play like a major role in the market next year. You're going to see more of an emphasis on keeping more diligent work on tracking of lineage properly. When you don't have percentages of like tracking the lineage, you're going to be putting into breeding efforts at subpar when dealing with animals that have clear and set lineage.
Yeah, for sure. And then like yeah, as far as like the percentages, I think that's also really important, helping that track down, because like even with like the Black Knight stuff and all the Dark Project stuff,
yeah.
and the crosses with that's super important for like stuff that looks at least somewhat similar to whatever you're breeding it to.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of the Black Knight stuff is really inbred. So, like they're smaller. They have like infertility issues. So when you're buying Black Knight, is it better to buy up here, or is it better to buy from somebody who already has outcrossed that line and has still proven like consistent work in that line? It's all up for debate, you know?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, some stuff definitely needs to like be outcrossed, of course. Like outcrossing in general is really important when you're looking at genetic and, you know, lineage and stuff and how it helps. Like how we were talking earlier about like outcrossing with like a pure macularis, if you're trying to, you know, prove out a gene, for an example, that's pretty much key when you're wanting to outcross, if you want that pure, quote-unquote, non-het animal.
Yeah, when you're dealing with just other hets, you can't just take 100% het and then take it to a normal and then say it's het-free if there's no visual.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to bring down your percentages. It's always going to be a possible het until you have those years of backing proving that out.
Exactly.
You can cut it down with like set pairings and like wombo combos sometimes, but it's just going to be, it's still work, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like genetics and stuff, focusing on stuff it's not a short process whatsoever. It takes time. So same thing with breeding. It all takes time.
Yeah, and we're so spoiled. Like we're working with leopard geckos. When you work with like, I got a pair of hognose snakes. Like we have a few of them now. They're not even ready for about 2 years. So macularis, pretty much, honestly, you can probably go every season and have something ready, hatch and breed. Is that the best? Like, we can get into that. That's a different topic. But we're spoiled on being able to see results a lot faster than, let's say, like snakes, bigger lizards. These are kind of like, if you want to get your toes wet and working with genetics and a vast like amount of phenotypes and everything, this is a really good kind of starter for everything else as well.
Yeah, and leopard geckos too, like, they're long-lived compared to, like, most smaller lizards. I mean, they live longer than bearded dragons and stuff. But as far as just, like breeding-wise, too, you have a longer, time spectrum as far as, like, breeding. And then...
Yeah, and if you do it right and you're not stunning the growth of your females are going to be able to breed for a little longer periods than you kind of breeding every single year and taking those hatchlings and breeding them before they're a little bit more mature, have more weight on them. Just because something's ovulating doesn't mean you have to pair it.
Mm-hmm.
It's patience. You're going to see a lot of people jumping in and jumping out. It's going to be consistent in the hobby. The people who stick around are going to be those people who do it because they have a passion for it. And, like, I try to surround myself with more people who are passionate about it because I'm trying to stay passionate within everything that I do and stay humble about things, but still have that professionalism while being my idiotic self, moving forward in the hobby and within this community.
Why should you keep track of your genetics?
Well, when you start off tracking lineage, like I've been mentioning and we've been talking about, you only set yourself up to win. Say you don't know percentages and somebody asks you for very detailed information regarding lineage and it includes percentages, what do? When you want to play in the big leagues, like air quotations, if people are looking for very specific bloodlines to put in their niche projects, having that detailed information of your pairings only benefits you as a breeder. It's simple math, and once you get the hang of it, it's a breeze. Like freaking Nick at Bubbasgeckos is a machine, can pop percentages out of his butt without a moment's hesitation. It's wild. It's insane to see.
Yeah, and then just the numbers and stuff like that. It's good. Like as far as if you're looking for something specifically, like a clown, for example, or like a black knight, and you're looking for like the percentage and stuff like that, and then they have like a 2.5 percentage on it or something like that, or something I guess lower, then it's kind of reputable because they've been tracking throughout all those times that they've been outcrossing it and just breeding with other stuff, and then they have that percentage, but they're still having that in as far as like the lineage. I think that's very very smart, or just like reputable, that they're still adding that into it, saying that this was from that line, or yeah.
Yeah, and like imagine that, dude. You see a clown that has 2% Infernal on it, and then you know that they've tracked that all the way down to that 2%, and still they have the transparency and kind of the cojones to still say, this is that cross, it's not a pure.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2% this. Like, that speaks volumes as to who that breeder is and how reputable they see themselves and how they're going to portray themselves in tomorrow's market. I'd say the market, like, it sounds like price, but it's not. Like, we still need to be able to survive in our passion, and if you're trying to do this, like, as a person, how I want to do this, I want to do it as professionally as I can, while still being my idiotic self, but going through in a way where I can be able to off of maybe some of this. Like, I'm still going to do tattooing. I'm still going to, like, work. I like working. But I want to at least cost of feeding, keeping, and providing the husbandry and that not just basic care and needs, but going above and beyond and making sure these animals are the best that I can possibly produce and have everything that they need going through a season. I feed and groom these geckos up to be like glory. They're like Wagyu geckos over here.
I mean, that's the best way to put it, though, too, like, making sure that, as far as, like, money and stuff like that and costs, it's good to reinvest what you already, like, from what you make and reinvesting it back into the geckos. I mean, that's the way I like to do it, at least. Whatever you make off of a gecko, you put it back into whatever you were doing with the
Anytime
geckos.
I make a sale, I get an invoice back from PayPal. I'm a crazy person. What do you think I'm going to spend that money on? You think I'm going to go buy a house? I'm going to put it in some trust fund? You think I'm going to go do something responsible? No, I'm going to buy more geckos. I'm going to buy another project. I want to breed freaking Gila monsters. I'm going to buy a pair. I'm not going to be responsible with that money, but it's just basically go to say, like, you're going to support like buying and like stuff like this. You're going to support people who have a passion for this and who are going to push the hobby like forward. And it's like, that's everything. That's not why I always try to pay asking price. I don't want your discounts, like, especially if you're my friend. Like, look, I want to support you and like bring you up. Like, I'm nothing if I don't have a community with me, like, to be involved with. I love that about this community. I love this about the hobby, and like the people that I've surrounded myself with are genuinely some of the best people. They have great heads on their shoulders, and they're really similar into the stuff that I enjoy. So, super cool, super rad. I'm in love with this.
And that's the best way to like put it as far as like passion and stuff, and because like it just seems like people are like they're in it for like breeding purposes and stuff like that, but we're also just in it for the animals too, and that's why it's fun.
Yeah, and I talked to you about that pairing before. We'll definitely talk about it when it's not so touchy and I can like express it a little bit better and have the time to do so. Mm-hmm. But like that's what I want to stay doing, like finding like little projects on my own that I want to do that are gonna not be as acceptable in a sense where everything's politically correct, but just working where I'm not sacrificing anything from a gecko or like putting anything at risk, just doing stuff for me. Like pet quality geckos, like I'll probably always have some just because I like meeting people who want to work with leopard geckos. Maybe they don't want to breed them, they just want to have one as a pet. Good homes like that, I try to hook people up. I try to do stuff where I can bring new people into the hobby that I got jumped into or I like dove into when I was younger. Like, this stuff is awesome and I want you to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, why don't we do the closing now?
Yeah.
Alright, David, so for just being on the podcast, I want to thank you because this was awesome to do this video with you, breaking down genetics and why it's so important.
No, honestly, yeah, thank you, dude. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me fill in today. This is only going to benefit people. Granted, not a lot of people are going to have maybe time to sit down and listen to this fully, but even if they catch a glimpse of it, all this is going to do is going to benefit the hobby. It's going to give people more research to kind of like look into, more knowledge to fill their heads with. And what you're doing is great. Who you're having on next is going to be really interesting. Definitely going to listen through all of that.
Yeah.
And then, dude, only up from here. I'm excited. I'm going to push this podcast. I think it's going to do wonders too. Get you up to that strength and Leo status, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I want to get Evan on here soon.
I know, that'll be sick. Let's bring Manifest Evan onto this podcast.
Yes.
Podcast, e-podcast.
A podcast inside of a podcast inside of a podcast. You know, the simulator type stuff.
And then we'll have Snoop Dogg be the judge.
Oh yes, for sure. Well, alright, David. Thank you for being on. And it was just awesome. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys next episode.